Peacebuilders has been working with over 150 grassroots organizations, national, regional, and global civil society networks since November of last year to find ways on how to ensure the meaningful participation of women and youth peace builders in these processes. And we have stayed active from the beginning until the present, and we expressed our disappointment when we did not see women peace and security and youth peace and security in the action coalitions for the Generation Equality Forum. But having said that, we're still continuing our conversations with the members of the core group to the Generation Equality Forum, the civil society, UN Women, and the governments of France and Mexico, because we believe we can still find ways to form a standalone action coalition on women peace and security and youth peace and security, or identify other modalities to ensure that these agendas are at the core, and at the same time have a special focus in this very important process. We have a very exciting agenda this afternoon. And again, I apologize for the delay because of the technical glitches. So after this presentation of objectives and introduction, we will have opening remarks from the Deputy Permanent Representatives of South Africa, Nepal, and Sierra Leone, our co-organizers in this event. And then we will also have an intervention, a recorded intervention for a young woman, from a young woman leader in South Sudan, Elizabeth Yokwe. And then this will be followed by keynote speeches from Ms. Sarah Hendricks, the Director for Policy and Program, the Intergovernmental Division at UN Women, and Ambassador Anwarul K. Chowdhury, the former Undersecretary General of the UN and initiator of Resolution 1325 Precursor Statement. And then we will also have a presentation of the advocacy paper, one of the important lobbying instrument that the civil society-led Coalition on Women, Peace and Security and Youth Peace and Security has produced throughout this process. And then we will also have a very special briefing, and we're excited to note this, from Dr. Patricia Licuanan from the Philippines, who was the chair of the CSW in 1995. And as such, she also chaired the deliberations and negotiations over the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action in Beijing. In that segment, we will also be joined by Dr. Lina Abirafe, the Executive Director of the Arab Institute for Women at the Lebanese American University. And we will also have a message from Ms. Bandan Narana, the Vice Chair of the CEDAW Committee. That segment will be followed by interventions from members of the core group, Shannon Kowalski from International Women's Health Coalition, who is one of the civil society representatives to the Generation Equality Forum. And she will also be joined by Ms. Paivi Canisto, the Chief of the Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action Section at UN Women. And we're also excited to inform you that Ms. Jacqueline O'Neill, Canada's Ambassador for Women, Peace and Security, will also be sharing her thoughts in that segment, as well. So do Ms. Cecile Mazzakurati from UNFPA, who is representing the Secretariat for the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security, and two civil society colleagues, Biplapis Resta from Asia Pacific Resource Center for Women in Kuala Lumpur. And that part is very important because we will open the floor to everyone else who would like to make an intervention. I just wanted to call in my co-moderator, Malika Ayer, to say hello to everyone.
Hello, everyone. My name is Malika Ayer. I'm a program officer at the Global Network of Women Peace Builders. Thank you all for joining with us today. Despite the outbreak of coronavirus, we have 167 people on the call with us, which is very exciting. In the spirit of intergenerational dialogue and the overlapping concerns, between the Youth, Peace and Security and Women, Peace and Security agendas, I will be co-moderating this roundtable discussion with Mathis.
Thank you, Malika. And now we move on to our agenda. I am honored to call on the Deputy Permanent Representative of South Africa, Ambassador Solisa Mabongo. He will be sharing his thoughts on why are the Women, Peace and Security and Youth, Peace and Security agendas are important for South Africa, and as well as to all member states, the UN, civil society, and a private sector in order to ensure that the voices of women and youth peace builders are central in this conversation and decision making, as well as the outcomes of this process. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Soy de Colombia, soy Waldistero Hurtado. De verdad que pues, es muy interesante participar en este diálogo, aunque quisiéramos entender mucho más, pero...
Sorry, excuse me, sorry, we are having the Ambassador Mabongo from South Africa now give his opening remarks, and we'll open the floor later for intervention from the audience. Just give us one moment. I think we are unmuting Ambassador, and now you have the floor. Thank you.
Bueno, entonces...
Sorry.
Agnieszka, could you please intervene? Yeah.
Muchas gracias por su intervención. Vamos ahora a seguir con nuestra agenda. Vamos a escuchar al ambasador del África del Sur y después vamos a abrir el espacio para otras contribuciones. Entonces, muchas gracias y vamos a invitar a usted a hablar más tarde.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias a usted. And I'll just take this opportunity. We're unable to do the. We are unable to use the automatic unmute option with the ambassador. So, Ambassador, if we may just invite you to unmute yourself and please take the floor.
Ambassador Mabongo, can you speak? You should be unmuted. Okay, perhaps while we're waiting for the Ambassador Mabongo from South Africa, can we call on? Perhaps while we're waiting on the Ambassador from South Africa, could we call on Deputy Permanent Representative of Nepal, Ambassador Ghanshyam Bhandari?
Ambassador Bhandari, you're unmuted. You can speak.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes,
we can.
Clearly.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for this introduction. Thank you for the opportunity. First of all, I would like to express happiness on behalf of the Permanent Mission of Nepal and on behalf of the government of Nepal for being one of the collaborators of this event. I feel delighted to speak a few words at this event organized around the theme of integrating WPS and YPS agendas in the Generation Equality Forum. I truly appreciate the commitment of Global Network of Women Peace Builders to organize this program and bring us all together in fact, 177 people at this moment together to deliberate on the theme of women, peace and security and youth, peace and security at a time when the whole world is facing an unprecedented crisis due to the outbreak of coronavirus. We at Nepal Mission, as I said, feel proud to be one of the collaborators of this event. And I thank you once again for this opportunity. I will be brief in my remarks. I would want to touch upon two major points. One about the policies and programs that the government of Nepal has implemented and adopted with regard to WPS and YPS agendas. And second, of course, as the question that was given to me is about the importance of WPS and YPS agendas and the full integration of those agendas in Generation Equality Forum. Excellencies and dear colleagues, the year 2020 is a pivotal year for gender equality and empowerment of women, girls, and the youth. This is so because it marks not only the beginning of the decade of action for 2030 agenda, but also the celebration of 25th anniversary of Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, 20th anniversary of UN Security Council Resolution 1025, as well as the 5th anniversary of UN Security Council Resolution 2250. These coinciding milestones provide us with an opportunity to assess what we have achieved in terms of implementing the WPS and YPS agendas, reaffirm our commitments, and work together to build on the progress we have achieved so far. For this, it is critical that we understand the close link between these two agendas and promote partnerships between governments, civil societies, think tanks, and the dynamic groups and communities of the youth, in particular, young women and girls. With regard to these two agendas, women, peace and security, and youth, peace and security agendas in Nepal, I would like to reiterate that Nepal champions these agendas. As a post-conflict country, we are one of those countries in which these two instruments of WPS and YPS have been taken as the key instruments to address the impacts of conflict. The Constitution of Nepal guarantees 33% of women representation in national and provincial legislature and local governments. As a result, there are currently more than 40% elected women representatives, including in the federal parliament, provincial assemblies, and local governments. In 2011, when Nepal adopted its first national action plan to implement the resolution 1025 in 20, it was the first country in South Asia and the second one in Asia to do so. Nepal made explicit efforts to localize NAP with the mandatory provision of 33% of women's representation in local peace committees. Nepal's NAP has been an example of a transparent, inclusive, and participatory process with the close involvement of conflict victims and civil society organizations. The NAP, along with other instruments, catalyzed and enhanced participation of women in peace negotiations, both at the community and national level, especially after the end of decade-long conflict and subsequent peace-building processes. Nepal has also enacted legislations, policies, and programs incorporating the CEDAW and Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Nepal's example has been well shared with the countries in the region and beyond. The success of the first NAP has led us to the soon-to-be adopted second National Plan of Action with a focus on sexual violence, particularly those related to the conflict. Similarly, to achieve the aspirations of the Constitution of Nepal and the 2030 Agenda, the government of Nepal has laid out plans and policies to empower, include, ensure political, economic, and social, as well as employment rights of the youth. In line with the Security Council Resolution 2250, the government of Nepal recognizes the importance of youth as agents of change in the maintenance and promotion of peace and security. We focus on participation, partnership, prevention, protection, and disengagement and reintegration as 5 pillars of action related to young people's contribution to peace processes and conflict resolution. Nepal's Youth Policy 2015 stresses the emphasis on quality of vocational education, employment, entrepreneurship,
Peanut, can they pause, okay?
skill development, health and social security. Youth engagement, leadership development, sports and entertainment are also the key features when it comes to empowering the youth in that policy. We believe that the well-informed youth will play a great deal of role in socio-economic progress with their meaningful participation in politics, economy, and other sectors. Now, as we prepare for the Generation Equality Forum, which is one of the key milestones in terms of Beijing Platform for Action, we must understand that Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action should not be looked at in a silo with WPS and YPS agenda. They all constitute an agenda that first and foremost is anchored in ending and preventing conflict. The frameworks, all frameworks are mutually reinforcing and demand urgent action for their full and effective implementation with inclusive participation of women, youth, and civil society organizations. We believe that the important processes such as Beijing+25 take on board the women and youth peace builders. We also believe that the full integration of WPS and YPS agendas in the Generation Equality Forum is very much important. Nepal strongly supports the inclusion of WPS and YPS agendas through the establishment of a standalone action coalition on peace and security for a modality that gives it equal recognition and strong political support. To conclude, the crucial milestones, anniversaries, and processes are not just the occasion to take stock of what has happened or what we have achieved in the past. They're also the occasions to better reflect, plan, and look up to the future. The Generation Equality Forum, being organized in the context of Beijing+25, should therefore be an occasion to better integrate WPS and YPS agendas and achieve better results vis-a-vis peace, security, and sustainable development. I thank you all for your attention. Take care and stay safe and well. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Bandari, for that powerful presentation. And we commend Nepal, as always, for its commitment to the women, peace and security and youth peace and security agendas. And we're very grateful for how you underscored that it is critical for us not to silo the women, peace and security, youth peace and security agendas with the gender equality agenda. Thank you so much. I would now like to call on the Deputy Permanent Representative of Sierra Leone, Ambassador Victoria Suleimani, to share her thoughts.
Thank you very much. Madam Moderator, can you hear me?
Yes, very well, Ambassador.
Okay, thank you for giving me the floor. I bring you all greetings from the Permanent Mission of Sierra Leone to the United Nations. And I must say that we are extremely elated to be on this panel. I thank you, Mavic, for the invitation to participate. And I must say that our inspiration to respond to this call to co-host this event stems from Sierra Leone's unflinching commitment to the implementation of the WPS and YPS agendas. As co-sponsor, we are elated that at the level of participation, I think it's already 178, including myself, which speaks volume to the primacy given to these two agendas by civil society groups advocating for a standalone action coalition and member states who support them, as well as agencies and institutions that are co-sponsoring this event. Madam Moderator, distinguished participants, without wasting much of your time, I need to proceed to answer the two very important questions you have posed to us this afternoon, which are why the WPS and YPS agendas are important to Sierra Leone. Secondly, why Sierra Leone believes it is important for other member states, the UN, CSO, and the private sector should support the full integration of the two agendas into the Beijing+25 Generation Equality Forum. First and foremost, 2020, we are all aware, marks the 20th anniversary of UN Security adoption of UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which also coincides with Beijing+25. we are equally aware that the effects of armed conflicts and other forms of conflicts on women is clearly highlighted as a critical area of concern on the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, and therefore the need for the inclusion of this very important agenda into the Beijing+25 Generation Equality Forum. Secondly, Sierra Leone, you all know, is a post-conflict country, a country that has seen women at the forefront of building peace and addressing humanitarian emergencies, including the Ebola crisis in 2014. Sierra Leone joined member states that we are ready to implement Resolution 1325 soon after its adoption by adopting a national action plan. Sierra Leone was among the first 4 countries in Africa and the first 17 countries in the whole world. Since then, we have remained champions of this agenda. We have witnessed firsthand young people that were brainwashed during our 11-year senseless and brutal civil war to unleash mayhem on their own people because they lacked the right kind of education. Madam Moderator, distinguished participants, our post-conflict background is another motivation for us to join this advocacy for the full integration of the 2 important agendas into the Beijing+25 Generation Equality Forum. This move, we believe strongly, will be an important milestone in moving these very important agendas forward. Distinguished participants, Sierra Leone has championed the WPS agenda unabated, you will agree with me. As a country with a very small young population, the present administration of His Excellency President Julius Maada Bio sees young people as leaders and equal participants in decision-making and peace building. In that connection, Sierra Leone cannot but strongly support a YPS agenda. We therefore reiterate our call for the establishment of a standalone action coalition on WPS and YPS into the Generation Equality Forum. Given our level of expertise, commitment, and post-conflict background, we believe we can capably lead an action coalition on WPS and YPS if it is included into the Generation Equality Forum, notwithstanding our recent submission to UN Women to lead on the action coalition on gender-based violence. Madam Moderator, let me quickly add that I am not in any way insinuating that we are less competent to lead on the action coalition on gender-based violence. As a matter of fact, the recent launching of the male involvement strategy on SGBV by our president demonstrates further commitment to fighting SGBV in our community. What I'm saying is that Sierra Leone leading on an action coalition on WPS and YPS will be more impactful for all the reasons I have just mentioned earlier. On the question of the need for international support for the inclusion of YPS and WPS into the Generation Equality Forum, we believe now is the moment that must not be lost. We must collectively join hands to create a separate room for WPS and YPS agendas during this global conversation for urgent and accountability, for urgent action and accountability for gender equality. Distinguished participants, peace and security are prerequisites for gender equality and the empowerment of women. The meaningful participation of women in conflict prevention, peace building, and decision-making at all levels is therefore central to the full implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Sierra Leone believes more support for the integration of WPS and YPS into the Generation Equality Forum will demonstrate strong political will and commitment to a comprehensive outcome blueprint for Beijing+25 Generation Equality Forum. Distinguished participants, Sierra Leone is alarmed at the exclusion of women and youth peace builders in this process. We are also deeply concerned about the weak WPS and YPS language in most of the regional outcome documents and the political declaration adopted during CSW procedural meeting held on March 9, 2020. Sierra Leone is equally concerned that post-conflict countries and conflict-affected countries have not been adequately represented in the discussion around the Generation Equality Forum, including the design print workshop held in Paris sometime this year. I want to conclude by reiterating our unflinching support for the call to fully integrate WPS, YPS into Generation Equality Forum to ensure strong leadership and ownership by member states, especially those affected by conflict and by conflicts. Civil society, UN, as well as private sector, we therefore call on all and sundry to join translate this aspiration into reality. I thank you for listening, everyone.
Thank you, Ambassador Soleimani, for that powerful presentation, and especially highlighting the need for Global South countries, especially conflict-affected countries, to be part of the leadership of a standalone coalition on women, peace and security and youth peace and security. I also appreciate how you emphasize civil society participation all throughout, including especially young people. We're still trying to fix Ambassador Mabongo's connection. And while we're doing that, I first would like to, I'm using my moderator's prerogative to make modification on the agenda, knowing the time limitation of some of our speakers. We'll go back to the opening remarks. At this point, I would like to call on Ms. Sarah Hendricks, the Director for Program and Intergovernmental Support from UN Women, and who is also a member representing UN Women to the core group. Sarah, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, and certainly wonderful to be with everybody today. All of you, and we're extending certainly our solidarity and shared concern for the changing situation within the context of COVID that we all find ourselves in. Distinguished speakers and colleagues and excellencies and partners, thanks for joining us and everyone online, and special thanks to the Global Network of Women Peace Builders and to the many co-sponsors for organizing this discussion. On this 25th anniversary for the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, as well as the 20th anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, we see this indeed as a defining moment for gender equality, and I know all of you do as well. The Generation Equality Forum presents a critical opportunity in a 5-year time frame for civil society-centered global multi-stakeholder partnership. And alongside all of you, we believe it's time for urgent, for scaled up actions to realize the promise of women's human rights and the promise of gender equality, with adolescent girls, with young women, truly at the heart of this work and at the heart of the Generation Equality campaign. Please do allow me to reiterate UN Women's commitment to women's participation and protection in conflict resolution, in peacemaking, as well as in peace building work, and our commitment to enhance gender responsive conflict prevention and relief and recovery efforts. I also want to thank women peace builders and youth peace builders for their commitment to this process, as well as the tireless and strong engagement in this journey. We want to take note of the serious concerns that were raised by civil society, as well as by other partners, noting the previous speaker as well, regarding the absence of a dedicated Action Coalition theme on women, peace, and security. And so in light of that, the Generation Equality Forum's core group set up a task force really to look deeply and intentionally at this issue. The task force is comprised of representatives from the governments of Mexico, of France, civil society representatives, as well as UN Women. And the task force in the last weeks has prioritized deliberations really to identify specific actions that can strengthen women, peace, and security, as well as youth peace and security integration into the Generation Equality Forum process. We are very committed to ensuring that women, peace, and security and youth peace and security is a core part of the process, and that we can harness the support of member states and the private sector. Let me explain for a moment what this task force has done. Essentially, they have explored 4 possible options for meaningfully integrating the WPS and YPS agenda. Option 1, a standalone action coalition on women, peace and security and youth peace and security. Option 2, to broaden an existing coalition by incorporating WPS and UPS issues. Option 3, to integrate women, peace and security and youth peace and security actions across all the existing action coalition themes. And option 4, to build a women, peace and security compact to spur action on the existing strong normative framework on women, peace and security and humanitarian action. In the last week, our executive director at UN Women has held consultations with women peace builders in New York and also around the world to get feedback on these 4 different options. Many of you on this call today have been part of those conversations. And we will present this feedback to the Generation Equality Core Group for their guidance on the way forward in the coming days. Let me provide, however, a high-level overview of the input that has been received. In consultation with various civil society organizations, the 4 options have been highly considered, but 2 of them seem to have risen to the top as being most acceptable or highly viable at this point. And those 2 options are the first as well as the 4th, a separate action coalition, or the 4th, a new mechanism, which for now we have named the compact. There seems to be some strong level of support for the latter. Let me share with you at this moment a readout on some burgeoning ideas about what this Women, Peace and Security Compact or hybrid approach could look like, as we've been hearing it through this consultation process. This could consolidate the advanced normative framework on women, peace and security, including national action plans, and help us to move forward to something that could bring more visibility to the agenda and create opportunities for women, peace and security implementation along other fora, not only at the Security Council. Essentially, people have said, we don't want replication, but we really want to move forward. In our consultations, we've heard that the compact makes sense because, unlike some other themes in the action coalitions, the women, peace and security and humanitarian work has its own standalone normative framework and an already identified set of priorities, and, as we all know, a number of existing coordination mechanisms. And so, in that vein, the compact could operate taking some guiding principles into account. And people, through this consultation process, have highlighted and proposed a range of different guiding principles. And I'll share some of them with you now. Principles such as being grounded in the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Another principle, having young women peace builders and young women affected by crises being purposely and intentionally engaged. Strengthening the coordination across existing women, peace, security, humanitarian action mechanisms, systems, networks, partnerships, and capacities. Another principle would be for all stakeholders, especially women, peace builders, and crisis-affected women, to have full and meaningful engagement in the design and governance structure. And the same has been proposed for young peace builders, as well as young women affected by crisis. Visibility and integration within the Generation Equality Forum process, and an opportunity to provide impetus for the 20th anniversary of UN Security Council Resolution 1325. Recognition, political support, and financial commitment akin to the action coalitions. And also sustainable and predictable financing with due diligence applied to funding partners. And finally, the inclusion of an accountability mechanism. And so in sum, these are some of the ideas of guiding principles that this proposed compact could take into account. So how would a compact differ from an action coalition? This too has been part of the conversations in the many consultations that have been held over the past number of weeks. And a compact it has been shared, would be a dedicated outcome of the Generation Equality Forum. It would, as I said previously, build on the existing normative framework and identify priorities and coordination mechanisms for women, peace and security and humanitarian action. It wouldn't necessarily use the same format of 3 or 4 actions per Action Coalition theme, but might in fact allow for greater flexibility in conceptualizing the compact so that it fits within the specifics of the existing women, peace and security, youth, peace and security, and humanitarian action agenda. This compact could focus on accountability for existing priorities rather than trying to define new priorities. And it could act as a connector between the existing women, peace and security, youth, peace and security, and humanitarian action normative framework and implementation mechanisms. I think the hope across many of the people and constituents that have input into this conversation have highlighted that by leveraging the momentum of the Generation Equality Forum process and the 20th anniversary of Resolution 1325, a compact could drive a concerted push at global, national, and even local level for the realization of all commitments on women, peace, and security, and indeed on humanitarian action. We're using this opportunity of the Generation Equality Forum really to try to strengthen the women, peace, and security agenda, the integration of peace, the integration of development and humanitarian nexus with the youth, peace, and security agenda. There certainly are a lot of open questions about the compact and certainly a lot more to discuss. But we believe there's an opportunity, if indeed this idea is seen as a good one across all constituents, to shape it together. UN Women will be making some proposals in terms of substance and process, but we welcome ideas as well as feedback. We think that it's important to be creative, to not lose time, especially given the current circumstances, and to, in the same way that we're doing today, make full use of virtual means to consult and to shape this idea even further. UN Women will be discussing this proposal with the core group in this next week and hope for a quick decision to move forward on this. It will be, of course, important for the Women, Peace and Security and Youth, Peace and Security constituency to be on board with this approach so that we can move forward together. We truly appreciate your commitment, your engagement with the Generation Equality Forum, and as I said, we'll be sharing any additional updates that we can in the coming days and week on the process and consultations to truly strengthen women, peace, and security in the integration of the Generation Equality Forum. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that presentation. I was taking notes profusely. And we're excited to hear the different options that the task force is looking at, but especially the idea of the compact. I think it brings, it brings to fore a lot of the issues and concerns that civil society have been raising since 5 months ago. And we look forward to more conversations with the UN Women and other members of the core group in the coming days. COVID will not stop us from advancing the Women, Peace and Security and Youth, Peace and Security agendas in the Generation Equality Forum and ensure they're strongly linked to the 20th anniversary of 1325, 5th anniversary of 2250, and of course, 5th anniversary of the SDG. Thank you so much for your commitment and for that very clear presentation. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions, and I'm sure other colleagues at UN Women will be standing by to respond to the many questions and comments after the presentation. Allow me now to call on again Ambassador Mabongo from South Africa, who is now joining us on audio. Ambassador? Are
Hi,
you
good
ready to
afternoon.
join us?
Yes,
Okay, you
I'm
have
ready.
the
Good
floor,
afternoon.
Ambassador Amabongo from South Africa.
Yes. Hi, good afternoon. And thank you for the opportunity for us to participate in this very important discussion. The role of women and youth in peace and security is basically part of South Africa's DNA. This is because the women and the youth played a very important role in the political transition that led to a democratic South Africa. So after our independence from apartheid as a country, we went into to creating policies that enabled women and youth to play an even more important role in the peace building, as well as in the peace and development of our country as a whole. So as a result of that, historically, we have had during the past 2.5 decades, women playing a prominent role in government, women and youth playing a prominent role in the business sector, and of course, women and youth organizations being a vital part of our civil society, holding the government into account, bringing a very proactive and constructive solution to some of the problems that are facing our country. Our foreign policy as South Africa is centered on peacemaking and development, in particular with a focus on the African continent. And that is where we still have a lot of conflicts going on. We still have a lot of countries emerging from conflict. We still have a lot of countries that are in a stage of political transition as well as peace building. And this is where we see a very clear link between generation equality and women, peace and security, and youth peace and security agendas. Because in all these countries that are still emerging from conflict, in all the states that are undergoing their peace building processes, we again see women and youth playing a very important role. And this is not a charity that is being given to women and youth. It is as a result of the struggles. It is as a result of what they have earned because of the important role that they are playing in the solution, in all the peacemaking and peace building in the various countries. So to the extent that we still have these countries that are emerging from conflict, countries that are trying to consolidate peace, there is no question but to still emphasize the role of women and youth in peace building and peacemaking. In the United Nations, at a multilateral level, South Africa has been again a very prominent supporter of the agenda of women and youth in peace building and peacemaking. You will recall that in October 2019, South Africa had the opportunity to be the president of the Security Council. And we precisely and deliberately focused as part of our signature events on women and also on youth. So we had an event that was attended at a level of ministers, an event of the Security Council that was oversubscribed in terms of the speakers, focusing on women, peace and security, celebrating this upcoming 20th anniversary, preparing for the upcoming 20th anniversary of Resolution 1325. So this was a successful event that actually brought a focus to the importance of implementing Resolution 1325 in all its totality, without picking and choosing. And that was again a very intentional approach by South Africa. Again, during the same month of October in our presidency, we also derived, together with the other members of the Security Council, a presidential statement on youth, peace and security. So as again, I repeat that these two agendas are very much part of our DNA, both at a domestic level, but also at a multilateral level. And therefore, we are in support of ensuring that women, peace and security, and youth, peace and security is an integral part of the generation equality. And we will play our role. We've listened very carefully to the last speaker from the UN Women. And I think the options that have been presented are worth considering. We will also be considering them as a country, also with other stakeholders in South Africa. So again, thank you very much for allowing us to participate in this meeting. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Mabongo. And on behalf of all of the participants here and the civil society-led Action Coalition on Women, Peace and Security and Youth Peace and Security, I thank you for your strong leadership in the Security Council and overall. And overall, you're one of the first country to publicly speak about your support for a standalone Action Coalition on Women, Peace and Security and Youth Peace and Security. Thank you so much. I now would like to call on Ambassador Chowdhury, the former Undersecretary General of the UN and initiator of the Security Council Resolution 1325 precursor statement. He is the one who made a conceptual breakthrough to bring gender equality and women's rights in the work of the Security Council and present the idea of a Security Council resolution on women, peace, and security. Ambassador Chowdhury, we are honored to have you, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Mavi. Can you hear me?
Very well, Ambassador.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to speak. Greetings to you all during these difficult days when we are facing the COVID-19 pandemic. To start with, I would sort of philosophically say that time flies, as we say all the time. Yes, it was exactly 10 days and 20 years ago on the International Women's Day on 8th of March 2000. As the President of the Security Council, I could mobilize the Council to recognize in a statement that said, I quote, "Peace is inextricably linked with equality between women and men," end of quote, and affirmed the value of full and equal participation of women at all decision-making levels. That is when the seed for Resolution 1325 was sown. The resolution was finally adopted unanimously on 31st of October of the same year, after tough negotiations for 8 months, overcoming major obstacles created by the permanent members of the Council. I must, at this point, thank Global Network of Women's Peace Builders for taking the initiative of convening this meeting, and also in the past number of weeks have been the lead organization, lead NGO, focusing on the issues of women, peace and security, and youth, peace and security. And I pay tribute to Mavik's leadership in this process. She had been a persistent and determined player in this effort by all of us. I also appreciated the statement made by the diplomats from Nepal, Sierra Leone, and South Africa. I commend them for their support to the WPS and YPS agendas. Since Beijing, the many partner organizations of today's events, and I'm very impressed by the number of partners that have joined in this event. The civil society in general have been strongly stressing the importance of women's equal participation in all efforts for peace and security, in the prevention and resolution of conflicts, and in peace building. While women are often the first victims of armed conflict, they must also and always be recognized as a key to the solution. Women have an essential role to play in rebuilding war-shattered societies, and not through token representation, but as full-fledged equal participants in the process. Sustainable peace is inseparable from gender equality, as many of you have underlined. As Kofi Annan always emphasized, and I quote him, "For generations, women have served as peace educators, both in their families and in their societies. They have proved instrumental in building bridges rather than walls." End of quote. It is a reality that politics, more so security, is a man's world. We also know that empowered women bring important and different skills and perspectives to the policy-making table in comparison to their male partners. The slogan of the global campaign on women, peace and security, which we launched in London in June 2014, reiterates, if we are serious about peace, we must take women seriously. In its citation for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2011 to 3 women peace builders, the Nobel Committee referred to 1325, the only specific resolution ever mentioned in Nobel citation, and asserted that, and I quote, "We cannot achieve democracy and lasting peace in the world unless women obtain the same opportunities as men to influence developments at all of society." Year 2020 gives us the opportunity to put renewed energy to roll back the dual scourges of patriarchy and misogyny. This is the time to push that back with greater resoluteness. One such opportunity is offered by Gender Equality Forum, with major involvement of civil society. The recent initiatives for a civil society-generated open letter of 27 January, led by Global Network for Women Peace Builders. The letter of 25 February from the 17-member 2015 UN High-Level Advisory Group for the Global Study on 1325. I had the honor of coordinating that letter on behalf of the group, and the consultation with civil society led by UN Women Executive Director on 13 March gave a major boost to the WPS agenda. In that consultation, I underscored that 1325 is integral to the implementation of Beijing Platform for Action, emphasizing that women's role and contribution to peace and security have been covered in 2 strategic objectives and actions in the Beijing Platform, namely women and armed conflict and women in power and decision-making. Need for the strategic action contained in paragraph 134 of the Beijing Platform relating to WPS agenda was naturally the motivation for me and many others for the conceptual and political breakthrough of 18 March 2000. Mavic referred to that. I also highlighted that the women's issues are at the core of UN's work, irrespective of the fact where those originate from or get mandated by the General Assembly or the Security Council or the UN Secretariat. The General Agreement on 13 March, as outlined by the Executive Director from Zile, and now I hear that the similar reiteration by Sarah Hendricks, was to establish a separate compact coalition for WPS and YPS agendas in the Generation Equality Forum process. WPS office in UN Women would be the focal UN entity to support the Compact Coalition. We believe that member states from the global south should be leading the Compact Coalition. And I heard that emphasis given by other speakers also. This has been detailed, and Mavic in her opening statement mentioned about the compact and the possibility of a standalone action coalition. Year 2020 brings together the synergies for 25, 20, and 5. Yes, Beijing plus 25, 1325 plus 20, and 2250 plus 5 for youth, peace, and security. So that all 3 anniversaries together generate the needed political will and action to give a boost to the feminist objective of true gender equality and empowerment of women and girls. Feminism is a smart policy which is inclusive, uses all potentials, and leaves no one behind. Women's equality makes our planet safe and secure. I am proud to be a feminist. All of us need to be. That is how we make our planet a better place to live for all. Small actions can have big impacts in making this vision a reality. As Secretary General Guterres has called for, together, let's kickstart a decade of delivery and action for people and planet. Thank you very much. Thank you, moderator, for giving me the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Chowdhury, for taking us back to 2000, when you made the breakthrough in the Security Council, but also highlighting what we have achieved, especially in the normative framework, but also highlighting that we need to remain vigilant. We need to remain vigilant so that our achievements would translate into positive difference in the lives of women and men, girls and boys, local populations, especially in conflict-affected communities in developing countries. And thank you for your continued leadership and the inspiration that you've always provided. I'm sure everyone will agree with me that this has been a very exciting discussion, a lot of interesting information, a lot of profound insights. We're behind time, at least 30 minutes, I believe. And our dear audience members, please tell us if it's fine with you, if we extend maybe for at least 15 minutes, so we will end at 2:45. If there are no, okay, I can see messages coming in. Yes, please extend. Thank you very much. Now, without further ado, I would now request our colleague Dina to put on the video message from Elizabeth Iokwe, a young woman leader from South Sudan, from EVE Organization for Women and Development, and who is also a member of the Young Women for Peace and Leadership program of GNWP.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Binyok from South Sudan. I am working with the organization, and I'm also part of the Young Women for Peace and Leadership program. I am honored to speak to you today about why I think it is important for young women to be involved and to be part of the Beijing+25 and Generation Equality Forum. The first reason is that in contexts such as South Sudan, where young women are navigating through a post-war culture and also fighting against stereotypes, negative cultural norms, places where they're segregated from decision-making, political participation, and education, among others, women still actively stand and come and fight for equality. They still actively put themselves on the line to try and achieve peace and security in their communities. And I believe that it is an injustice for the very people who are working to make sure that the vision of the Beijing 25 and the vision of the other policies such as UNSCR 1325 and 2250 should come to life are not included and recognized. Another reason is that these young women are working with limited information. When we stop them or keep them from participating in such forums, we are further limiting their information. In such forums, it would be a chance for them to gain information, learn about the Beijing 25, where it came from, how it started, how far it's come, and how much further there is to go. And so this opportunity should be availed to them because it will improve the quality of the work that they do at the grassroots level. And finally, I would like to say that the young women leaders today will be the mentors tomorrow. When we do not let them participate in such forums, we are limiting the information and wisdom that they're going to pass on to the next generation. And I believe that it is a mistake to keep them marginalized. I hope that this will change. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, I will now turn it over to my co-moderator, Malika Ayer.
Thank you very much, Mavic. And thank you to you all for being on the call and listening to those opening remarks. We are now going to present the advocacy paper prepared by the civil society-led Beijing+25 Women, Peace and Security, Youth, Peace and Security Action Coalition. As you know, this is a critical time, and 2020 has many, many critical anniversaries. So in response, women and youth peace builders formed this coalition to discuss urgent actions necessary for the full and effective implementation of the Women, Peace and Security and Youth, Peace and Security agendas and their intersections with the Beijing+25 process and Generation Equality Forum, which will be the culmination of these anniversaries. We, as the Beijing+25 civil society-led Women, Peace and Security, Youth, Peace and Security Action Coalition, are now 160 organizations strong from 40 different countries. We are grassroots women and youth peace builders, national, regional, and global women's rights and feminist organizations, and civil society who are working towards the full and effective implementation of these agendas. Our primary purpose has been to coordinate and facilitate the development and dissemination of unified messaging on the Women, Peace and Security and Youth, Peace and Security agendas in ways that advance the achievements of civil society, prevents the weakening of agreed upon language in the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, and instead solicit greater accountability as well as political and financial commitments to the Feminist and Women's Movement Action Plan, which is the parallel outcome document prepared by the NGO Committee on the Status of Women. Our coalition also aims to increase the awareness of grassroots organizations working in conflict-affected countries and territories about the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, particularly youth peace builders who may not have been present in 1995, but still equally want to advocate for the implementation of the Beijing Declaration. Through months of online discussions, regional and thematic calls, and collaborative drafting and review processes, we developed this advocacy paper with key messages and concrete recommendations, which we are launching today. For those of you who RSVP'd, you should have received in your email a link to access this advocacy paper. My colleague will also be posting it in the chat functionality of Zoom so that you can click on it and access the link to see it while we are speaking as well and later. One of the core messages of this advocacy paper, as it reflects a broad range of views and perspectives of what gender equality means in the context of conflict prevention, conflict and post-conflict situations, is that there cannot be empowerment without peace, and no peace without gender equality. The advocacy paper calls on member states, UN entities, civil society, the private sector, and the media to integrate its recommendations into all of the Beijing+25 and Generation Equality Forum processes and outcome documents. Another resounding message from this paper is that the impact of armed conflict on women and youth is critical, cross-cutting, urgent and universal as an issue, and a persistent obstacle to the fulfillment of women's rights and gender equality. Without a standalone action coalition focused specifically on WPS and YPS, the same level of mobilization for resources, political and financial commitments, and accountability and implementation cannot be guaranteed. Therefore, this advocacy paper outlines countless essential actions for sustainable peace and gender equality, which cannot be mainstreamed into the existing GES Action Coalition. So we are very excited to work with the core group members in ensuring the implementation and integration of these two agendas. We have prepared a video of 6 different participating organizations of the civil society-led Action Coalition who will be presenting the various themes of this advocacy paper. We have the Afghan Women Welfare and Development Association. We have the Amasuru from Latin America. We have the Democracy Development Center from Ukraine. We have Better World Organization for Community Development from Iraq. We have Fontaine Isoko from Burundi and the Canadian Council of Young Feminists from Canada. I would like to say that the outline of this paper is based on the Feminist and Women's Movement Action Plan, which we mentioned is a parallel document coordinated by the NGO Committee on the Status of Women. And the sections are as follows: participation, accountability, and gender responsive institutions, freedom from violence, stigma, and stereotypes, inclusive development, shared prosperity, and decent work, poverty eradication, social protection, and social services, peaceful and inclusive societies, and finally, environmental conservation, protection, and rehabilitation.
Hi, my name is Farzana Bahadri. I'm the program coordinator for Afghan Women Welfare and Development Association from Afghanistan. I'll be presenting our key priorities and recommendations for thematic area number 1, which is on participation, accountability, and gender responsive institutions. Currently, Afghanistan is in a pivotal context and the peace process is going with the Taliban, but there is a huge marginalization of youth and women in the peace process and in the formal talks. Political, economical, and social inequalities and discriminatory practices are major barriers to women and youth's meaningful participation in peace building. The lack of access to information, the threat of violence, as well as unpredictable and inadequate funding, especially for the grassroots women and youth organizations, are related obstacles that prevent participation in decision-making and peace building. In Afghanistan, Afghan women and girls face the same barriers and obstacles currently in the peace process. We need member states, UN entities, and the donor community to allocate substantive resources for meaningful, systematic, and regular consultations with civil society organizations led by youth and women to ensure that youth and Afghan women are involved in the development, implementation, and evaluation of this process. Thank you.
I am Lidia Beltran. I am from Colombia and coordinator at Amasuru, a network of almost 400 women working in security and defense in Latin America and the Caribbean. The growing complexity of armed conflict and the proliferation of violence in Latin America and the Caribbean requires a locally driven, multisectoral, and gender-sensitive strategy to sustain peace and address the root causes of conflict. Young women and men are stereotyped as passive victims or perpetrators of organized criminal groups and extreme violence. They are seen as a problem rather than part of the solution. Transitional justice process rarely take into account the demands, experience, and perspectives of women, which limits their effectiveness. Every day, we see how violence against women and youth, including sexual and gender-based violence, continue to occur with impunity both during and post-conflict. For example, in countries such as Colombia, the states of Northern Triangle in Central America, and Mexico, femicide rates are skyrocketing. In Venezuela, the trend is even more worrying, given the growing crisis. Since women and youth have different experience of violence, then specific interventions should be implemented. When government create prevention strategies without consulting civil society or including the voices of diverse and marginalized groups, they end up being ineffective in curbing discrimination and human rights abuses. Our recommendations to member states are: first, They should reform discriminatory laws and policies that stigmatize marginalized groups so as to prevent gender-based violence and strengthen accountability and safe space reporting mechanisms. Second, member states should meaningfully involve women and youth in the development of gender-sensitive and inclusive measures to prevent violence, such as community violence reduction programs and efforts to curb femicide. Third, they should respect, protect, and support women's rights and human rights defenders by assuming their inalienable rights to freedom of organization, peaceful assembly, and participation in public affairs. Our main recommendation to civil society organizations, particularly women's rights entities, is to further engage men and boys, along with other important communities and stakeholders, such as religious leaders, indigenous leaders, and local government in their advocacy for gender equality and sustainable peace.
I'm not sure what these lines on the screens are, so please ignore them.
Hi, everybody. My name is Maria Dmitrieva, and I represent the NGO Democracy Development Center from Ukraine. I'm presenting the thematic area 3 on inclusive development, shared prosperity, and decent work. As we know, even in the times of peace, women face multiple barriers on entering and staying in the labor market. Those include poor labor standards, sexual harassment, lack of safety, inadequate social protections, and unpaid care labor that women perform at home. Their economic exclusion limits their power over their personal choices in sexual and reproductive life. Women who have limited resources often cannot leave their abusive or violent partners. Economic exclusion even gets worse in the situation of a conflict or a war. And women who have no access to resources are easy prey for traffickers. They can be forced into sexual slavery or sold into early marriage. And those who are displaced, those who are refugees, find it even more difficult to find gainful employment. And often these women are the sole breadwinners in their families, which makes it even worse. Women and youth continue to be excluded from the peace processes and decision-making when it comes to economic recovery, and they are not included as priority groups by donors. Investing in inclusive economic development is a necessary conflict prevention strategy. Economic exclusion has been identified to be a driver of conflict and recruitment to organized crime and violent extremist groups across the world. Growing inequalities within countries threaten social stability and thus have to be addressed.
This is Wala Mushir Ahmed, the director of Better World Organization for Community Development from Kurdistan region of Iraq. Here I will be representing the thematic area number 4 of the advocacy paper, which is poverty, eradication, social protection, and social services. The theme focuses on several key points such as the impact of poverty and conflict on vulnerable communities, which results in preventing women and youth to have equal access to opportunities, social protection, and economic opportunities. Armed conflict and resulting forced displacement and humanitarian emergencies have gendered impact on women and girls to have equal access to basic rights that provided through nationally appropriate social protection system, such as education, healthcare, maternity care, food and water security, employment, political representation, and participation in decision-making. Women and youth belonging to historically marginalized groups, such as indigenous, ethnic, or religious minorities in particular, experience violent conflict and poverty due to systematic discrimination and marginalization. Yazidi, as religious minorities in Iraq, are clear examples of how they have experienced the multi-layered discrimination, including sexual enslavement of their females. There are 3 main recommendations related to the theme number 4. First, member states should maintain and ensure equal access for women and girls to nationally appropriated social protection system, which respond to the urgent and long-term needs of women, young women, girls, and other marginalized groups during or after armed conflict. Member states should make specific investment in education at all levels as a tool for peace and protection of women and youth and other marginalized and vulnerable communities. Member states, UN entities, and donor community should develop and implement gender-sensitive emergency response that reduces the vulnerability of women and youth to sexual violence, radicalization, and trafficking.
My name is Sogundi Nyanzobe. I'm Advocacy Program Officer at Fountain Isoko and Working Group on Women and Youth for Peace and Security in the Great Lakes region of Africa. I stand here on behalf of Burundians and neighbors in the region who advocate for peace and security and promote sustainable development. Women and girls, through civil society organizations, are key actors in advocating for human rights in their community to raise awareness on stigma and all kinds of violence. Women's organizations also help other women achieve economic empowerment and independence through income-generating initiative and saving association. They participate in the implementation of the 1325 resolution, as well as youth agenda, and hold accountable the governmental institutions. Women and girls' human rights must constitute a top priority for all stakeholders in the conflict-affected zones. Today, women and youth have limited access to funds, jeopardizing the need for ongoing advocacy for sustainable peace and development. The regionalization of the ethnic groups conflict in the Great Lakes region of Africa remain a threat to women and youth well-being in the region. I urge the donor instead to support long-term cross-border peace-building program and ensure the effective implementation of 1325 and 2250 resolution at both regional and national levels. I recommend donors to support civil society organizations in their effort for national and regional evaluation and monitoring, disaggregating qualitative and quantitative data for an effective advocacy. Our voices count for inclusive global policies. Thank you for your attention.
Hi, my name is Ali, and I am an outreach advisor for the Canadian Council of Young Feminists, the youth advisory to Canadian Senator Marilyn McPhedran. As young Canadians, we have seen firsthand the links between environmental conservation, protection, and rehabilitation and the implementation of the Women in Peace and Security and Youth in Peace and Security agendas. Here are the Beijing+25 WPS, YPS Action Coalition's key messages and recommendations surrounding environmental conservation, protection, and rehabilitation. The coalition's three key messages emphasize, firstly, conflict-affected women and communities around the world identify access to resources as one of the main sources of conflict. Secondly, young women and girls in conflict-affected countries are often the most vulnerable to climate insecurity. And thirdly, enabling young people to play a role in environmental conservation and peace building is crucial for progress. The primary recommendations of the coalition state, firstly, member states should establish mechanisms to improve the meaningful participation of women and youth, particularly Indigenous climate activists, scientists, grassroots farmers, and technical advisors in decision-making at all levels for environmental safety and resource management programs and policies. Secondly, member states should ensure equal and uninhibited access to natural resources for women, youth, and other historically marginalized groups across age, gender, race, ethnicity, religion, sexual identities, and socioeconomic class. Thirdly, member states should raise awareness of conservation and sustainable living practices in local communities and promote local participation in spatial planning and infrastructure development. Fourthly, UN entities should mainstream gender and youth perspectives into the design, approval, and execution of projects funded under the Global Environment Facility and other suitable UN businesses. Fifthly, the private sector should use sustainable practices for product development, packaging, marketing, and distribution, respecting and conserving Indigenous lands and protected natural areas. In addition, UN entities should improve sustainable and environmentally friendly humanitarian emergency response. And lastly, the private sector should commit to the women's empowerment principles and the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, along with the UN's due diligence screening. As youth leaders from across the vast country of Canada, we are proud to have contributed to these calls to actions and to stand by with over 100 grassroots and civil society-led networks. Together, we believe we can make this world safe, just, and peaceful.
Thank you very much for those incredible videos from participating organizations from across the world who are presenting the messages echoed in our advocacy paper. I think all of these videos have shown that peace and security is a necessary prerequisite for the fulfillment of all other aspects of gender equality and the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action priorities. These unique aspects cannot be, of peace and security cannot be captured through mainstreaming alone, which is why we as a civil society-led action coalition have been advocating for our own standalone structure. Now we will move on to a section where I would like to invite Dr. Patricia Lequanen, who is the former chair of the UN Commission on the Status of Women, convener of the Southeast Asia Women's Watch, and most importantly, she chaired the deliberations and negotiations of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action on behalf of the Philippine Commission on Women in 1995. She is going to bring us a historical perspective on how peace, security, equality, and development have been recurring themes from not only Beijing, but Mexico in 1975, Copenhagen in 1980, Nairobi in 1985, and then everything onwards up until this very day.
As chair of the Commission on the Status of Women and the preparatory process for the UN Fourth World Conference on Women, and then as chair of the main committee in Beijing that negotiated the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, I had to be totally fair and unbiased towards all points of view, allowing a thorough discussion of issues, and finally, managing the process to enable a genuine consensus to emerge. I had, however, two commitments, or one might call them biases, which I allowed to be manifested. First was a commitment to all 12 critical areas of concern in the draft platform. These critical areas of concern were, after all, the product of a complex consultation process at national, regional, and global levels. The Economic and Social Commissions convened regional preparatory meetings in Jakarta, Vienna, Mar del Plata, Amman, and Dakar. And each of these meetings resulted in a regional platform for action. The 12 critical areas, therefore, reflected concerns common to all or most regions, and women in armed conflict was one of them. Thus, the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action and its 12 critical areas was the product of consensus carefully hammered out over close to a 2-year period at regional preparatory meetings, at meetings of the Preparatory Committee in New York, and finally at the Beijing International Convention Center from September 4 to 15, 1995. And it is the most comprehensive and progressive global blueprint for women's rights and empowerment. In our observance of Beijing+25, it is essential that the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, with its 12 critical areas of concern, be properly recognized and emphasized. I have concerns about the clustering of these critical areas into a handful of themes. This is done for practical reasons, of course, and as an attempt to synchronize with the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. But inevitably, in the process, some critical areas fall through the cracks. This is what might have happened to women and armed conflict, or women, peace, and security. I believe very strongly that for all their importance, the SDGs are not a replacement for the platform and its 12 critical areas of concern. Another commitment I had during the Beijing process that may have helped the focus on women and armed conflict was the commitment to the participation of NGOs. Access for NGOs was always a thorny issue, but I can say that most major meetings of the Beijing preparations and of the conference itself were open to NGOs. In addition, most national delegations included NGO representatives, and regular briefings for NGOs were conducted by the Secretariat as well as by delegations. Looking back, I can say that partnership with NGOs throughout the Beijing process, though not without tension, was unparalleled. Among the NGOs, one must note the presence of women peace builders pushing the women and armed conflict agenda. Today, as we observe Beijing+25, one must express concern over the shrinking space for NGOs in the UN in general and in the Beijing+25 process in particular. One final reminder about Beijing 25 years ago and its significance today, particularly for this forum. We must remember that the theme of the UN Fourth World Conference on Women was action for equality, development, and peace. This was the unanimous choice to reflect continuity with the UN Decade on Women, 1976 to 1985, as well as the Nairobi Forward-Looking Strategies for the Advancement of Women, and the action necessary to move the women's agenda forward. Equality, development, and peace. Today, 25 years after Beijing, let us give women and peace the importance it deserves.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lequenan. I would now like to call on Dr. Lina Abirafe, who is the Executive Director of the Arab Institute for Women at the Lebanese American University. She will be speaking from her experience working in global humanitarian contexts and her present experience working in academia in the Arab region as to what her key messages are on the women, peace and security and youth peace and security agendas that are essential to be reflected in these discussions. We have a second question for her on how we can strengthen partnerships with academic institutions in raising awareness of and improving the implementation of these agendas and the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Dr. Abirafe, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me. Unfortunately, I can't seem to get the video to work. Am I connected?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. Okay. So I have quite a bit to say, and given that we're running late, I'll try and be concise. Now representing the Arab region with the Institute, we cover the 22 Arab states. You all know that these states are among the worst in terms of the Women, Peace and Security Index. We face the highest gender gaps, multiple protracted crises that clearly show no signs of abating. This is unfortunately no surprise. Now we've entered the 10th year of the Syria crisis, if you can believe, 10 years of this. And we continue to face insecurities in Palestine, in Iraq, in Yemen, and so on. And in those situations, women's inclusion and engagement remain minimal, and they continue to be highly contested. And we talk about youth as well, in particular young women. That is an even larger challenge. And this engagement, as we've seen it so far, has been relatively piecemeal. It's been based on convenience, often as an afterthought. So for instance, using the case of Lebanon, September 2019, last year, Lebanon endorsed the National Action Plan on WPS, which was a great step, a big step in the right direction for women and for peace. But the Institute itself actually was part of the committee that made it happen. So we're very pleased for that. We've been advocating for it for several years. But we see that endorsing is one thing, and resourcing and actually implementing are entirely different things. And those seem to be relatively unattainable. And given Lebanon's current state, I'm sure you've been following the news, what's happening there. It's been layer after layer of conflict and insecurity. This issue has certainly fallen off the agenda, and the country seems to think there are more important things, so to speak, to tackle. But it is precisely in these times of insecurity, we keep saying that women and youth need to be more actively engaged. And if they are left out now, they'll always be left out. We cannot continue to bump these issues to the bottom of our priority list. There's a recent initiative that's been launched, actually just this month, a feminist coalition for the region towards Beijing+25. And in their launching, they stated that they were looking to recognize the interlinkages between the battles women face in the public and private spheres, which is critical, placing emphasis on international feminist solidarity and looking at clarifying all the misconceptions about the Arab region on global platforms and in global fora like this. And being responsive to women's needs and realities for them, for this coalition, means focusing on violence against women, end of it, and on women in conflict and their struggles for security. So in all of that, academia presents an interesting but also unlikely partner. Having come from a humanitarian background for almost 2 decades and now 5 years at the helm of this institute, I think academia tends to be left off the agenda, and I think that's a serious omission. What we are is a local partner, one that clearly, most obviously, is embedded in the socio-cultural context, but more importantly, more than just being a local partner, we're a neutral player and a natural convener in what is very often a highly polarized landscape. So we're able to work with young people, obviously, work with women clearly. In terms of our academic programming, we're able to infuse messages on equality, on inclusion, on women, peace, and security. In our master's program in interdisciplinary gender studies, as an example, in our certificate program in gender and development and humanitarian assistance, in the conferences and conversations and convenings that we have. So 2016, as one example, we launched our partnership with UNESCO with an international conference on prioritizing WPS in the Arab region. And what happened with that was, the result was what we call the Beirut Call to Action, which was an attempt to localize the WPS agenda, to promote women's activism in peace and in war, and to institutionalize collaborations on WPS. And that was really just the beginning. And so year after year, we continue to have these events. And last year, 2019, we had another event on women, peace, and security. And on the panel, we had obviously all the usual high-level speakers, but also a young Syrian woman, a youth activist, because we really believe in putting into practice what it is that we commit to by elevating young women's voices in terms of these issues, because they're just so important and so often left off the agenda. And what she said, this dynamic woman, her name is Serine Dardari, is that she highlighted the urgent and clearly non-negotiable need to ensure the participation of women and youth. And she said that the political economy of the Arab world is one that's been built on exclusion and conflict. And without the ability of young people and young women specifically to express themselves, and without the solid institutions that represent them, peace and prosperity is going to forever remain an illusion in the region. And I think that's absolutely right. And our research that we've been doing on young Arab women's feminist activism in times of insecurity and not reveals that the way that they are organizing is intersectional, is organic, is informal, it's regional. So they cross national borders and boundaries much better than I think we do, the older generation, but they're insufficiently recognized and supported by us. So how are we going to make sure that they have not just a seat at the table, as we keep saying, but we actively go to their tables. So going forward, in terms of Beijing+25, a stronger effort, rather, to redefine peace and security from the perspective of those who are most affected. And to do this with a strong and very clear, unapologetic feminist framework. Because we've said that the current engagement has been tokenistic, and certainly in the Arab region, that's the case. Further, we are not addressing the barriers to women's participation in these processes. We bandy about the rhetoric of engaging a local partner and ignore community-led initiatives. So this is about rights, respect, and representation. We need to see this not as exceptions, but as the norm, not an afterthought. And we've got to question our own accountability in the process. Because without women, we keep saying, there is no P, there is no S without the W. So I certainly hope that we take that on board much more strongly than we have already. And looking at this current context, the corona crisis, I mean, we see that women wage peace and counter insecurities everywhere all the time, home, community, country, and at the global level. And if we do not view all of our actions through the lens of women's safety and security, the entire world loses as a result. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abirafe, for that strong statement about redefining peace and security in feminist terms. Our last intervention before we open up the floor and have some other people speak is from Ms. Vandana Rana, who is the vice chair of the CEDAW committee and from Nepal. She will be speaking about why it's important to promote synergies between the WPS and YPS agendas, the Beijing Declaration, and CEDAW. So, Vandana? Yeah.
I'm happy to be a part of this online roundtable discussion on Beijing+25, Where Are the Women and Youth, organized by GNWP. I'm joining from Doha, where I'm in transit now on my way back home from New York. This difficult and critical juncture that the world is facing reinforces more than ever the need for inclusive lens if we are to achieve the equality, development, and peace as aspired by the Beijing Conference 25 years ago. The groundbreaking Beijing Platform for Action has been a strong guiding framework for equality, development, and peace, and 25 years later remains even more relevant to protect human rights and gender equality. As we commemorate 25 years of Beijing, we cannot assess the achievements and challenges to equality and development without the peace angle. It is so very interconnected. And the work of the CEDAW committee has been crucial in strengthening the accountability of state parties in accelerating the implementation of the Beijing commitments. With its legislative and binding framework, the convention is the strongest mechanism to promote and protect women's human rights. Through its 189 states parties and the hundreds of activists and civil society organizations which are constantly engaged and advocating for its implementation, the CEDAW Convention has become a leading force in ensuring the promotion, protection, and fulfillment of the powerful message that women's rights are human rights fostered by the Beijing Platform for Action. The Convention offers a unique, binding, and human rights-based foundation for furthering the full implementation of the BPFA. We cannot implement if we cannot measure. The CEDAW Committee, through its constructive dialogue and recommendations, helps member states to measure their progress and identify areas where efforts need to be intensified. CEDAW tells member states where they stand on their commitments and reinforce their commitments for further action. The United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, with its mandated framework for women, peace, and security, has proved to be a strong tool for more direct and deliberate actions for recognition of women's role and participation in conflict prevention, conflict, and post-conflict situations. Many post-conflict countries benefited a lot from a national action plan on the implementation of 1325 and subsequent resolutions. However, without the obligation to report on the progress of the NAP implementation, the state accountability was a huge challenge. And that is where the CEDAW General Recommendation 30, adopted in 2013, has been playing a critical role. Within the committee, I chair the task force for this general recommendation, and I'm the focal point for women, peace, and security. And in our assessment of the state reports and constructive dialogues, since 2014, there has been a 40% increase in states reporting on WPS. More and more countries are developing NAPs, and there are more dedicated and specific financial and human resources for the implementation of WPS, as well as better collaboration between governments and civil society. However, critical gap remains in women and youth participation in negotiations and peace talks. So this is where I see the interconnectedness of CEDAW and the Beijing Platform for Action and the actual changes that take place on the ground. The CEDAW Committee is a voice for the millions who do not have a voice. The progress brought about through the CEDAW mechanism have been life-changing for many young generations. Without the involvement of the youth, we cannot have lasting peace. With its legislative framework, the CEDAW Committee is helping member states in building their accountability to women and youth peace and security for a world that establishes lasting peace and security for all. Therefore, in the Generation Equality Forum, we need to create effective space for women and youth to realize their rights and role to development and peace. We need to listen to the voices of women and young girls. The different needs of women and girls in conflict and post-conflict situations must be addressed. The Asia-Pacific region, in its review of the Beijing+25, identified 6 priority areas, which included economic empowerment, social services and universal health care, freedom from violence, stigma and stereotype, participation, climate change, and above all, peaceful and inclusive societies. Peace is a priority area as identified by the countries of the South. This must be reflected in the Global Generation Equality Platform as well. A significant message which needs intensified global attention is that ensuring rights of women and girls contributes to development and peace. Peace cannot be dealt in silos. It is in this regard that the CEDAW Convention is a critical instrument to ensure the full promotion and protection of women's rights and substantive gender equality for an inclusive and peaceful society. I congratulate GNWP for being the voices of the women and youth engaged in promoting peace and would like to thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much for all those interventions. And now I would like to move on to welcome members, representatives of the core group of the Generation Equality Forum, in addition to Sarah Hendricks earlier. I'm very pleased to call on Shannon Kowalski from the International Women's Health Coalition, the civil society, one of the 2 civil society representatives of the core group, to give us ideas on how can the core group and the Generation Equality Forum and other stakeholders in the WPS and YPS communities ensure that women and youth peace builders are meaningfully participating in these processes and will influence their outcomes. Shannon, we have you on video.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. It's been such a pleasure to be able to participate in the discussion and to hear from you all about the work that you're doing and the incredible advocacy that you're doing around this issue. First, I want to take a moment to express my solidarity with all of you as you grapple with and deal with the impacts of coronavirus. It's a unique moment of crisis for us, and it's one that is both the result of and an exacerbator of the other crises that women's movements have been pointing to for years, not least the crisis of inequality as well as the crisis of conflict. And so this is a moment where it's really upending a lot of both the plans that we had as the core group for the Generation Equality Forums, but also, our day-to-day lives. And I realize that this is something that many of you have had to grapple with in conflict and post-conflict situations. But one that is something that I think we cannot ignore, and we need to work together to ensure feminist responses too. So I want to say, as I've gotten to know and work with Malika, Mavic, and Agnieszka over the past several months, I've been so moved by the really sophisticated organizing and advocacy the Women, Peace and Security and Youth Peace and Security Action Coalitions have led. It shouldn't have been necessary, but you've really helped to ensure that women, peace and security and youth peace and security issues are a major priority for the Generation Equality Forums. Our task ahead is not only to ensure linkages between the issues that you work on and the action coalitions that already exist, but also to ensure, whether through the standalone action coalition or through the compact, that these issues get the specific attention, resources, and mobilization of political will and leadership that is so critical and necessary. I'm looking forward to receiving the proposals from the working group that Sarah outlined, and to being able to work with you all and my colleagues on the core group to ensure a really positive outcome, and one that meets your needs as a community. We have a real opportunity with the Generation Equality Forums, I think. It's an opportunity to do things differently. It will be a place where progressive, like-minded governments, women's movements, the private sector, and other actors can come together in new and different ways to drive change. And I wanted to just share with you all a few thoughts that I have about how these forums are different and how we can use them to drive change and build solidarity amongst feminists, but with different stakeholders. So there are a few things that set this forum apart. And one thing that we've heard really clearly from your community is the importance of young feminist leadership. And it's one thing that we're committed to across the board, focusing young feminist leadership and ensuring diversity and inclusion. We have been recognizing, and we've been using it as a central principle in organizing these forums, that women and girls experience the world differently depending on their age, ability, social location, their sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, where they live, whether rural or urban, amongst other factors. So these forums will be focusing on celebrating the diversity of all women and girls and upholding the centrality of their leadership in our work to achieve gender equality and human rights. But beyond ensuring inclusion, we're also focused on ensuring cross-movement dialogue and building of solidarity, as I mentioned previously. The evidence is, or should I say, the increasingly strong evidence we have about the power of women's movements and feminist movements in driving change tells us that by building alliances across sectors and ensuring that we as feminists come together around a common vision, we can be much more impactful than when we're working alone. And as somebody who works primarily on sexual and reproductive health and rights, I know that there are clear linkages between my work and the work that you do to promote peace and women's and young people's leadership in peace building, conflict resolution, and prevention. And I'm really looking forward to creating intentional opportunities to ensure cross-movement dialogue, sharing of best practices, and strategies to build solidarity and drive action amongst different stakeholders. And I believe that the forums will be an opportunity for us to do this more and more effectively. So at the forums, we will celebrate the centrality of feminist movements in driving progress towards equality, but we will also recognize the potential of working across sectors to catalyze bold, transformative, and ambitious change. We heard two powerful examples today from Ambassador Chowdhury and Patricia Lequanen about how collaborations between government actors and women's movements resulted both in the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, but also Security Council Resolution 1325. So I'm hopeful that through the Generation Equality Forums, we'll be able to create new and different ways of working where progressive governments, feminist movements, and other actors share power first and foremost, but work together to define solutions and move us all forward towards a more equitable world. And there's two ways that we're doing this: through the action coalitions that we hope will drive concrete time-bound policy change and resources to critical issues for women and girls. And we will ensure, like I said, that women, peace and security are addressed both across action coalitions, but either through the standalone action coalition or the compact. And two, by learning the lessons from Beijing and creating those kinds of multi-stakeholder alliances that will highlight and advance gender equality and the full range of issues that affect women's and girls' lives in multilateral spaces like the UN. So just a few thoughts on how we can move forward. First is maintaining this open dialogue that we've been able to develop over the past couple of months, and making sure that we are sharing information, sharing opportunities to mobilize and engage, and working together on an agenda that I think we all believe fully in. The other way you can get involved is by becoming involved with the NGO CSW's advisory working group process and the efforts with the Center for Women's Global Leadership to develop a feminist and women's movement action plan. And you presented on that, so I know that you're fully engaged in that process. But to join the NGO CSW advisory working group that we're consulting with on a monthly basis around Beijing+25 and the Generation Equality Forums in particular, you can email beijing25@ngocsw.org. I'll type that into the chat once I'm done talking. The other thing that you can do, which you're already doing really effectively, is advocate with governments to express leadership, to ensure that they can join and make meaningful commitments to the action coalitions and commitments that specifically address women, peace, and security. It was great to hear, for example, today from the governments of Nepal, Sierra Leone, and South Africa, their commitment to ensuring that women, peace and security and youth peace and security issues are addressed in the generation equality forums in a number of ways, including some of those that have been discussed already. And then finally, we will be making some calls in the next couple of months for organizations to join action coalitions themselves. And I hope that we will be able to see organizations that work on women's peace and security issues stepping up to become members of action coalition, of all of the action coalitions, and not just a standalone one or the compact as we discussed. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm always available for consultation and to advocate alongside of you to make sure that these issues are the top of our agenda.
Thank you very much, Shannon. And I would like to say this publicly. We are extremely grateful to the Civil Society Advisory Group, to the Generation Equality Forum, and especially Shannon in speaking publicly about their support for the Action Coalition on Women, Peace and Security and Youth Peace and Security. And I cannot agree with you more, Shannon, when you said the Generation Equality Forum is an opportunity to do things differently. I've been asked by many friends, is this worth it? Is this worth our limited time and energies? And I say, it is worth it. The Generation Equality Forum can be a game changer. And that is, of course, especially if women and youth peace builders who are already the game changers in many parts of the world are fully included, fully and meaningfully included. Before I call on our next speaker, I just would like to encourage everyone to keep posting comments and questions on the chat functionality of Zoom. We will try to address them in the course of in the remaining time, but if we are not able to address them, this will go to the task force. These are important questions and comments that the task force that is working on exploring the different options for integrating women, peace and security and youth peace and security agendas in the Generation Equality Forum. So at this point, I would like to call on Ms. Paivi Canisto, the Chief of the Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action Section at UN Women, to share her thoughts. Paivi, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mavic, and thank you everyone for participating in this discussion. It's been very inspiring to listen to what everyone is contributing to the thinking, how we move forward. It's wonderful that so many plans and so many committed parties are already present here and thinking together, and thank you for organizing this opportunity for that as well, and glad we have been able to contribute. Actually, Sarah Hendricks from UN Women, she already really did the presentation about the interaction with the core group, so I don't need to add to that one. I mean, we're doing everything we can, but the core group would be inclined to approve the compact as presented, and I'm very hopeful they will. There are also people in this call who can directly contribute to that, so thank you for everyone's support to that. So all I wanted to add, as we are running out of time, UN Women, and especially our Peace, Security and Humanitarian section is happy to support this process, happy to be the UN partner in this process, and we can offer our services to initiate also some of the, I mean, so much have been done already by you all, by the civil society, by member states. So what we can do from UN side, we are happy to offer our services to do that for you, so that all of you can promote women peace and security, and also youth peace and security in Generation Equality Forum, and then beyond that. So I would suggest that we would have a smaller group soon to make this concrete as soon as we have a core group decision, but we'll have a smaller group and we start moving forward very fast because we don't have time, but there is a huge advantage that so much work has been done already. Like the compact came, but we have so many existing processes that have already done part of our work, and all this inspirational forward-looking thinking has been done in this group, you know, in the civil society group as well as in the member states. So it's a good starting point. And I just wanted to tell that my colleagues, Sarah Douglas and Harriet Williams-Bright, and I believe David Coffey also are on this call, and please connect with us and we are there to support you in this process. Thank you very much. And I do believe that in peace and security, gender and humanitarian, youth peace and security, we can really do great game-changing actions, like you said. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Päivi. There's no doubt, even for a second, on how we can always rely on UN Women, most especially our colleague from the Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action section in highlighting the voices of women and youth peace builders. At this point, I have the honor and pleasure to call on Ambassador Jacqueline O'Neill of Canada, Ambassador for Women, Peace and Security. We all know about Canada's global leadership on women, peace and security agenda, so I wouldn't say much, but turn over the microphone to Ambassador O'Neill.
Thanks, Mavic. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. So I'm joined on the call by several colleagues from Canada, from our mission in New York, and from multiple teams here at headquarters distributed across Ottawa, and of course our fantastic Canadian civil society organizations, several of whom are co-sponsors, and one of whom we heard from directly through Ali Friedman. We're just grateful that this is happening, and there are so many of us on because despite the current circumstances, it's really crucial to Canada that we maintain this momentum and especially take advantage of this milestone year. So big thanks to GNWP for convening this call, and to all who are contributing around the world. I couldn't help but think throughout this meeting where you seamlessly brought us so many voices live and on video that we would definitely not have pulled this off if there were not so many young people involved in this group in this meeting. So thank you to all of you. So many reasons we need you. So I'll be very brief. I want to highlight a couple of ways that we think Canada could play a role in elevating the voices of women and youth peace builders. But first want to share a thought, an overarching thought on the issue, which is that we are a community that cares deeply about these issues, and we've worked on it for decades, and we've learned a lot, and often very much the hard way, about what it takes for good design of policy and programs. And those lessons include the fact that we need to be inclusive in our design and not just of implementing those. And that includes directively and proactively including and seeking out the voices of intersectional women peace builders. That includes grassroots leaders, indigenous peoples, climate activists. We've talked about earlier representatives of the global south and the global north, and especially of countries directly affected by conflict, because we really more than ever need to be learning from each other. Of civil society, I think we know that civil society is the reason why the women, peace and security and youth peace and security agendas exist, and that as government, we can only go so far without civil society's leadership and true ownership, and especially and increasingly of young people. We've also learned that all global efforts need to take a conflict sensitivity lens, and I want to make sure that we're all speaking about that lens through this work. And so, we've learned these lessons, and while generation is equality is an opportunity to do things differently, we also want to make sure we're remembering the foundational lessons that we've learned and are applying them. So we're grateful to all of you on this call who are working to help make that happen. So very briefly, a few ways that Canada wants to be supportive of this inclusion through generation equality in particular. First, we have volunteered to be part of the leadership of the Action Coalition on Feminist Movements and Leadership. And if that's confirmed, we want to work very closely with civil society, with philanthropic foundations, adolescent girls, and or organizations led by adolescent girls, and the private sector to ensure that women peace builders and youth are directly involved at all stages, including at the upcoming workshop for our Action Coalition leads. And so we're hoping that if we're able to play a leadership role in that coalition, we'll elevate women, peace and security, and youth peace and security within it. Second is, we're not a member of the core group, but we are a member of the multi-stakeholder steering committee. And so we've been listening actively during this call for inputs and priorities to raise within that group. We've gotten great input on this call, and we'll review the papers carefully as well, so thank you. And of course, YPS and WPS are priorities for us as a country overall. So the third area that we hope to contribute is through our existing roles as conveners of key groups. So for example, we're the coordinator of the UN Group of Friends on 1325 in New York, and my colleague Pierre-David Jean is on this call. We'll continue to work with member states and civil society to see how that group can be engaged. And this year, we're co-leading with Uruguay with the Women, Peace and Security Focal Points Network. And that leadership has been passed to us from Namibia. And next year, we'll be passing it to South Africa and Switzerland. And we've been working here with civil society to aim for complementary processes with civil society. And we really want to optimize those convening roles to share information, number one, and to see if we can find synergies between processes as much as possible, basically to make sure that we can, the processes are as linked or harmonized as much as possible, so that as we're talking about, we're building upon what exists already. And we want to do that with all of you, and we'll need a lot of input over the next weeks and months to figure out how to leverage that as best as possible, especially given the challenges that COVID-19 is presenting for all of us. So there may be other ways we can be supportive. Those are just a few, but we really look forward to continuing the conversation and are really, really grateful that you, MAVEC and JWP and your partners are elevating this issue as much as possible, given what a priority it is for Canada. Thank you.
You will for sure receive a lot of inputs, Ambassador O'Neill. And yeah, I cannot emphasize it more. Feminist leadership is at the core of our work on women, peace and security, and youth peace and security. We cannot lead in any, otherwise. I would now like to call on another strong supporter of this civil society-led action coalition on women, peace and security, youth peace and security, Ms. Cecile Mazzacurati from UNFPA, and who also is the head of the Secretariat for the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security. Cecile, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Mavic. Good afternoon, colleagues. And thank you so much to GNWP for organizing this meeting. I think that over 2 hours after the beginning, we're still at over 100 participants, which really show the interest we all have, of course, for the issue. But I think also I'm not the only one to find comforting this feminist get-together in the middle of this pandemic. So thank you, Mavic, Malika, and all colleagues from GNWP for giving us this space, and really for leading the charge to ensure that the Generation Equality Forum and the Beijing+25 process includes a strong, dedicated focus on women, youth peace and security, and youth peace and security. I'll be very brief. I just want to say a few words from the side of youth peace and security. We have a global coalition that was created in 2012, which has been from its origin a joint endeavor of the UN, youth-led civil society organizations, and youth-focused civil society organizations. I'm the co-chair for the UN. We also have my other co-chairs are Search for Common Ground and the United Network of Young Peacebuilders. And for the community working on youth peace and security, of course, women peace, and we see ourselves as the twin little sister of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. Resolution 2250 was very much modeled on 1325. It is the same agenda of inclusivity, of including historically marginalized voices and perspectives into peace building and peace processes. So we are, of course, very, very supportive of the efforts led by GNWP and all other partners from civil society to ensure there will be a dedicated focus on peace and security in the generation equality and the Beijing+25. 2020 is also a very important year for youth, peace and security with the 5th anniversary of the resolution. As mentioned by some of the speakers before, it will also be the year, actually in just a couple of weeks from now, the first report of the Secretary General on Youth, Peace and Security will be issued. There was going to be an open debate early April in the Security Council, which might be postponed given the circumstances, but I think there really is growing awareness from the entire UN system, member states, civil society partners on the importance to focus on these issues. So I just want to say that on behalf of the many partners from the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security, that we're here to support your efforts. Count us in for anything you might need. And also to add from the UNFPA perspective, UNFPA has proposed to play a leadership role in the coalition on bodily integrity and also be engaged in the GBV coalition. If this was to be confirmed, we would of course also use these platforms to raise consistently the questions of peace and security and the voices of women, and young people more generally in these platforms. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Cecile, and everyone in the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security. And I clearly remember a point from you in our previous conversation that, you know, how we often say young people need mentoring, but the truth is we are also mentored when we engage with young people. We learn from each other. So yeah, and I cannot express more gratitude for your commitment in bringing, you know, in always reminding us and supporting us in bringing these two agendas together to influence the rest of the work of the international community. We have a lot more questions and comments, and as Cecile has pointed out, we still have over 100 participants 2 hours later, but unfortunately we cannot extend anymore. I just want to share with you the immediate next steps for us is that we will be sharing the summary from this conversation, and we will be sharing them with the task force to inform their discussion on the different options for integrating the women, peace and security and youth, peace and security agendas in the Generation Equality Forum, but of course with everyone in this call. As I mentioned earlier, COVID-19 will not stop women and youth peace builders from our advocacy to make our voices heard and influence the Generation Equality Forum and the other important anniversaries this year. And again, reinforcing Cecile's point, it's also quite comforting to, you know, to know that we can still function despite, you know, the strict instructions for teleworking and not organizing in-person meetings. We've had challenges in the beginning of this conversation, but there's nothing we cannot overcome when we are together. Thank you everyone for your active participation. Malika, any other thoughts?
Thank you very much. I'd just like to echo the remarks that have been made throughout this 2.5 hours presentation, and I'm personally very grateful for the space that's being given to young women peace builders and equal partnership and leadership in this process. Thank you all, and I'm sure we'll be in touch. Our advocacy paper is available now for you to use or to read, and we will be in close communication with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, and bye everyone.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.